Welcome to Vermont Artists and Authors, where we interview great storytellers and artists from the amazing Green Mountain State. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the acclaimed and internationally celebrated author, Rana Tahir, and the award-winning illustrator, Brian Anderson. Hey, Rana. Hey, Brian.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is great. So this is exciting. So the two of you worked on a project, not geographically together, but you worked on a project together that is basically not a retelling of a tarot deck, but just a new tarot deck. So I'm very curious. So obviously, the tarot deck is not a new thing. It has been around for, I want to say off the cuff. I mean, like I know historically it comes from France, and it's been around about, was it 300 years ago? Is that about right?
Rana's got this. She probably knows more of the history than me.
Yeah. So tarot, as we know it today, you could trace back to the I want to say 17th century, if I'm remembering correctly, and really France. So this would have been, I think I'm counting my centuries right, but this would have been around like the Napoleonic era, etc.
Ron and Brian, what inspired you both to kind of create a deck for Choose Your Own Adventure? Was this something that was assigned to you, or is this something that you kind of heard about and you kind of jumped on the project?
From my perspective, because I didn't know Ron at the time that she was going to be on it, but Shannon had approached me because I had just done a cover for them, and they just kind of pitched, if you were to do a Choose Your Own Adventure tarot deck, what would you, send us a sample of what you would do. And being familiar with tarot, I knew it was an opportunity. I said, well, we're going to take pick one of your Choose Your Own Adventure books, and we'll base it on that. But to send them the samples, I just created this Steampunk Arcana Institute for fun, just to do the samples. And I sent them 3 sample cards, and she came back with, I want to do that. I'm like, oh, okay. So, yeah, it's kind of a happy accident.
Okay. And what about you, Rana?
Yeah, I came in later in the process. So I think by the time that I had come in, Brian had already finished sketches for all of the cards, I believe. They just weren't colored or inked yet. But yeah, Shannon just approached me. She said, I know you've read tarot. Would you be interested in writing the guidebook for this tarot deck that we're making? And at the time, I think it was still like we were still thinking about like Choose Your Own Adventure slants to the tarot, like a way to make it more interactive. But it didn't end up working out. But I just loved the cards. I loved the art. I mean, Brian did just a fantastic job, and the steampunk thing was just so up my alley. And I love tarot. And when I was asked to write the guidebook, I thought this was also a great opportunity to write about magic in ways for beginners that I don't necessarily always see all the time.
So Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but you made some of the major and minor incarna as teens, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that was exciting to me because, I've been around tarot. I've been a magician since 2nd grade, and I started using tarot in my performances in college. And I had never been around it before, and it was amazing because even though I performed as a mentalist in college, even though you had tricks to what you were doing, you could just do a tarot reading. You could just use it on its own, and I was blown away by it. But I think the cool thing about the Choose Your Own Adventure, I never looked at it this way. Like Rana said, it came into popularity as a game in the 16th, 17th century, especially Victorian London. It was huge, but so it was appealing to kids way back then, and that was kind of lost for a very long time. And it was really kind of cool to be able to bring it back to kids and to not take away. You hear the term tarot deck and you immediately think of fortune tellers and stuff, and that's not what it is. It's a very different thing. So to be able to kind of introduce kids to what it really is in a fun way is unique, and I don't think it's been really done before.
And so, Rana, you were also a tarot practitioner as well?
Yeah, I'm self-taught, and in the guidebook, I wrote a little bit about my history with tarot. But it was basically just a fluke. I happened to, when I first moved to the U.S., I was in a small town called, well, I went to a boarding school called Interlochen Arts Academy. And it's right by Traverse City, which is not a small town. It's a bigger city, but it was kind of small when I was there. And I just saw this occult shop down the street, and I was curious. Actually, the thing that drew me in was like they had a sign for belly dance lessons, and I grew up belly dancing, so I was like, I want to see what these people are doing, you know, just kind of stake them out. And when I went in there, there was no lesson happening. They weren't there, so I just decided, like, okay, well, I'm here. Let me browse the store. And I saw a tarot deck for the first time. And like that, I didn't know what tarot was really, outside of like, you know, like exposure in like cartoons or something growing up. Like I knew of tarot, but I didn't really know about it. And this deck of cards was just calling to me. And so I was like, whatever, I'll buy it. Sure. Why not? I just feel very drawn to it. And then I started practicing from there and teaching myself with the little guidebook that was in there. I still have that guidebook, and like the case, it was a cardboard case, and like it's completely fallen apart, but I can't throw it out. So I have like the cards, the little book that's like all crumpled up now, and the broken down box in this little case now on my altar at home. But yeah, that was the beginning.
Because if you look at this, the Choose Your Own Adventure logo is on the tarot card deck. It's on the guidebook. What does a choice-driven narrative have in common with a tarot deck?
I think a lot. Rana can probably speak to this too, but it's a lot because there's a lot of profound wisdom in a tarot deck, and so it's not foreseeing your future. It literally is a pathway. So you're using the cards to explore different ways to move forward in life, really, So it's not telling you, it's not like reading tea leaves or anything like that, where you're telling the future, but you can actually find good, solid, time, tested wisdom on how to kind of move forward. And it's also almost like a guided meditation in a way to get you thinking about things. I think that's one of the things I really like about tarot. So even if you're not familiar with how do you meditate, if you have a tarot deck, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just going to give you a really kind of cool way to explore ideas in your own head. So it's literally the first choose your own adventure. When you're drawing the cards, you're actually, choosing your way forward. And I think that's a cool thing. You can explore that in the story too. I think that's what I tried to do with the characters and stuff, is show you're on a journey from the beginning to the end, That's so, yeah, it's almost like Choose Your Own Adventure books were based on the tarot originally.
Right. Well, and then what was the name of the, I'm trying to remember the traditional artist, was it Rider Waite?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the most yeah.
Right. And so how did you balance kind of like that traditional Rider Waite imagery how did you balance honoring the classic tarot symbols while introducing your new steampunk inspired visual identity?
The big thing was the story, in essence, the story is the Arcana Institute is a steampunk academy where they use science, steampunky science, to help students explore the more spiritual side and, seeking wisdom. That's the whole purpose of it. So you're using technology to kind of bridge that gap. From there was then looking at because we want to use this to introduce it to kids. We don't want to lose a lot of the symbolism in the deck that you use to read the cards. So as I went through and designed each kind of idea for the character, they have their own story and all that. But what I made sure was to get those symbols into each card so that when kids are learning and they're looking at the guidebook that Rana did, they'll find those symbols. They can, it makes it much easier because you can buy tarot that are just, they kind of you can do away with all the symbolism and all that and just have fun with the imagery, which is great if you're experienced. But if you're new, those symbols really help guide you. You don't know the tarot, so you look for this symbol means that, this symbol means this. So they're there in the images, and that helps you along the way as you're learning to use the tarot deck.
Do you have a favorite image that you made that you're particularly proud of?
The King of Cups is one of my favorites, just because it's one that story-wise, that's one story that I would love to just expand into actual, book. That's one of the, just that symbol of him on that balloon chair and stuff like that. That and probably the Three of Wands was my other favorite.
Okay. Rana, how did your background in poetry kind of influence your tone and approach to writing the guidebook?
It's interesting because I find tarot came into my life around the same time that I was really exploring poetry. I share the story just because I think it's something some people can relate to. I hated poetry growing up. I was just not into it at all. And then I just had some really good teachers, and eventually, now my master's degree is in poetry, right? Complete 180. But the thing that drew me to poetry and the way I feel it fits with tarot is just, poetry is language being more so than prose or anything else. It's language being crafted very intentionally. And so with that, there's a lot of metaphor and symbolism. And that's tarot, right? Tarot is just, you engage with the artwork like you would engage with a poem. How does this symbol make me feel? What does it remind me of? How are the colors striking me? There's so many ways to interpret tarot cards that are intuitive in the same way that poetry can be intuitive.
So you kind of had to write the guidebook for beginners, but also you want it to be accessible for those that have a stronger understanding of what the tarot deck is. How did you kind of balance that?
I think that the balance came in some of the content in the guidebook. So obviously the descriptions and stuff, I think a more seasoned tarot reader, they might find it interesting, but they may not need the descriptions, right? They can just go straight to the cards, and they have that background. So the places where I thought to make it a little more interesting for people who are already familiar with tarot was to talk about sort of the stuff surrounding it, right? So we have just culturally, right, there's a certain way that tarot is looked at. There's a certain way that magic is looked at. And so, I really wanted this to be a book for everyone. So part of it is, I mentioned that, some people do use tarot for divination or for magic, but like Brian said, you can also just use it for meditation. It's a great tool. And however you want to approach tarot, there's no right or wrong of it, right? You can approach, there are some people who really sort of gatekeep, no, this is a magical tool or this is for witches or something like that. And then there are some people who gatekeep the other way and say, no, these are just cards for meditation. It's you can be open to both. There's really no substantive difference other than how do you use it and are you using it in an ethical way, right? If you're someone who believes that it's magical and then you're using it to predict futures, right? And then you're telling people this is what's going to happen, right? That's not an ethical way to practice for your purposes. And the person who's meditating, if they're not actually meditating and they're just assigning whatever they want to see rather than what they need to see, that's also not an ethical use for your own self, even though it's just meditative.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. Brian, talk about your method. Do you sketch things out first? Are you all digital? How does your process go?
I prefer to do everything by hand. When it comes to time-wise, though, digital digital's going to win out, especially with a project like this, because there's so many edits and changes you need to make. It would have taken quadruple the time at least to do it by hand all the way. But initially, the sketches were done by hand. So the initial sketches I did, do it all by hand, and then kind of scan those in and send them off. And then we kind of work from there. Yeah.
And do you use, is it all like Photoshop or what do you use?
I use, I'm blanking on the name, not Corel, but it's a manga software for doing manga comics. So it's more for just drawing comics. I love Photoshop, but it's got a little too much. There's a lot. It's got more power than you need. So the program I have is really just for drawing comics.
Was it Clip Studio? Is that what it's called?
Clip Studio, yeah. Clips, yeah.
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 So it just has the basic tools as if you were working traditionally.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so Rana, my other question for you is, like, based off of your experience as a tarot practitioner, were you able to utilize any of your own personal practices and techniques and kind of insert them in the book?
I really tried not to do that because, tarot is such an individual thing, and like everyone comes at it with their own practice and develops their own procedure. So I did put stuff in, but I put it, I tried to be clear, like, this is an example of how I do things. Other people have other ways, and you're going to have to explore and figure out what works best for you. I have a friend who's a tarot practitioner, and he's really great. And he does readings for the public. Like, you can hire him to do a reading for you. I don't do that. I just selectively will give readings, but most of the time I just do it for myself. But one thing that I always did was I would have people touch the cards. Like, I really felt like if I was getting a reading for someone, that they had to physically contact the cards. I just felt like that was a thing. And then my friend RC, he did not let you touch his cards, and I remember, like, he just said offhand, he had much more experience than I. And he was like, "Oh, you're very generous. You let people touch your cards." And I was like, I didn't see it that way. I just thought this was a thing you did. But that was a nice eye-opening experience for me. And I used that in the book, and just to give it to anyone else who's beginning to say, like, there is no right or wrong. You're going to have to intuitively feel your way through it and see what works best for you. So again, that was the ethos of writing the book. I really, anytime I did mention something that I did, I wanted to be very clear, like, just because I do it doesn't mean it's the way things must be done.
How does this deck reflect the choose your own adventure philosophy, and how do you see it set itself apart from, say, like other tarot decks that are currently available?
Well, I think Rana would agree with this. Is one, the Choose Your Own Adventure brand, it's, obviously it's geared towards kids. Mm-hmm. And you're literally handing them a deck of cards that they can go on a journey with, and it's literally, however you want to do your draw of cards, if you draw 3 cards or whatever it is, but every time it's going to be different. So literally every time you take out the deck, it's a choose your own adventure. It's really kind of cool. So you're doing away with the binding of a book and turn to this page or that page. It's right there for you, and everything's there. And you use that, and you use the guidebook to walk your way through it. And every single time you use it, it's going to be completely different, and you're going to learn something completely different.
You get multiple endings, just like a choose your own adventure book. And like, I want to put ending in air quotes because things don't actually end, right? But you can do you can have like a question in mind and do a reading for it, and then do another reading right after, and you'll get something very different. And I think that possibility is very much in line with choose your own adventure. And then just like, again, we're geared towards younger readers. So tarot is not, like, when I was going through the book, I was thinking, like, well, what would I have liked to know when I was teaching myself? What are the things that I've learned since then? Because most of the time, tarot decks are not geared towards younger readers, and like very few are actually geared towards beginners. Even a lot of them are just, if you're looking, they assume if you're looking for a tarot deck, it's because you already know what tarot is. But there are so many people who just, like myself, just find tarot somehow. But the books don't always compensate for those of us who have no background,
And so, like, the two of you have, like, so Rana, you've written books, and side note, like, I'm still wondering why they call this a booklet. It's 128 pages. It's not a booklet. It's a book. it's so usually it's like the two of you being a writer and an illustrator, you've worked with writers and you've worked with illustrators, but almost in tandem. For instance, like as an illustrator, you have to see the story. As a writer, you work in tandem with an illustrator. But Brian, you're illustrating a tarot deck. So how does the collaboration work between the two of you, in the sense that it's different than your classic illustrator author collaboration?
Yeah, it's kind of because I also illustrate my own books too. I've been fortunate I was able to do that. So from my angle, I approached it, basically wrote a story, and we've batted around the idea that it could be books based on it, because that's how I approached it. I created the entire story, the background story first of the Arcana Institute, and then every single card, every single character has a backstory. So you're seeing a scene from their story in that world. And then it was a matter of, that's why I'm glad I didn't have Rana's job, because she has to take it and, not only put together a guidebook for a tarot deck, which is a lot of work, but to do it from, this is for beginners and this is for kids, which I don't even know how you even begin that. So I kind of had the easier writing side of it. I just got to play with the story.
I mean, and having the framing of the Arcana Institute and that idea, like, I didn't get the whole story. I obviously don't have the backgrounds of all the characters in the cards and stuff, but just having that as like the frame really helped. I think it also helped me just tap into, I was a middle school teacher, so, like I could tap back into that part of myself as I was writing and think about, like, okay, this is a school. What are the things that, if I were a teacher teaching this to my seventh graders, how would I approach it? And, then I was like, well, I'd start with story. I'd start with like why this thing means something to me or how I came to it, and get some buy-in that way, and that's what I did with my students, like whenever I was planning a unit or something, the first thing was like, okay, how do I get buy-in? How do I get my students excited about this? And so that helped a lot. And then just the cards, like writing the cards was so fun, just because the art was like, you asked earlier favorite cards. My favorite card was the sun card. Like I love that card so much, and just having that and then using that as a frame, right? When I was writing, like, telling whoever the reader is, right? Look at the cards, spend time with them. Look at what colors jump out at you. Look at what symbols jump out at you, right? And having that framing also made it more fun. And I think that's really the difference between what makes a tarot guidebook and a tarot deck for beginners versus experts, right? Because you're walking them through the step of each step of how to interpret a card or how to get familiar with a card.
And so Brian, you, based off of your experience as being an illustrator for this particular project, what have you learned about yourself from doing this?
A lot of it was, it's every project. I don't have a set style. I use a different style for every project, which can be good and bad when you're an illustrator. Most places, when they're hiring, they want someone with one unique style. That's what they're buying. That's what they're hiring. But it was daunting, because now I was creating a whole new style for this particular deck. And I was trying to force a style upon it at the beginning that wasn't quite right. So there was a lot of back and forth of trying to figure out how do we make this work, And then a lot of that just came down to relying on Choose Your Own Adventure. What is it about? Looking back at the old books, and trying to bring that fun out. Because I love tarot. I mean, I could fill bookcases full of tarot decks. You're always going to see one you want. There's a Haunted Mansion one the other day that I wanted. I'm like, I don't need another deck. But so you can't get lost in, I could do anything. It could be, you have to then sit down and who are we trying to reach here? Who's the ideal reader? Who's, just like when you're writing a book, picture one person in your mind and then build around that. So that's why I tried to, initially I was doing kind of a washed out kind of watercolor painterly style. But then I just went towards more of my comic book background and doing more of a vibrant, bright, really kind of make it alive, more electric, so looking back at the old Choose Your Own Adventure covers, taking that style kind of, and then just making the colors super, super bright.
And what about you, Rana? What have you learned about yourself as an author from putting together this guidebook?
Yeah, I think what I learned, it's funny. It's like, because part of my writing was just sort of the how to get into tarot and stuff. I was relying a lot on like my own history with tarot, and I came out of it with a lot of reflections. I think even on the page, it might be apparent to a reader to see where my reflections are coming in as I'm thinking about these things. And I realized like I had sort of dropped my tarot practice for a while. I just got really busy with life and like all these other things. And then doing this book really brought me back into that practice. And I was like, oh yeah, I actually need this for myself. Like, why did I ever stop? What? Hello, So that was the big thing. And I've been, since writing it, I've been being more intentional about my use of tarot and just using that as a grounding mechanism. I think especially now, like a lot of us probably feel like we need a lot of grounding, So it was good to have that back. And I think that was the biggest thing, was like, I should not have let it go. And this was just by coincidence, or kismet or something, like that this just happened, that I got this opportunity to engage again.
And so this is the first project that the two of you worked together on, correct?
Yeah.
And so you guys are going to be working together on a new project?
Not that we know of. I mean, I'm hoping maybe we expand on this tarot deck. So hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to work with Brian again. I'm a huge fan of your art. Like, even not just the Choose Your Own Adventure, but also like if you go on Brian's socials, it's just so great.
Thank you. Yeah, it'd be exciting because when Shannon first, we played around with the idea of expanding the books, and then Rana came on and wrote that guidebook. I'm like, ooh, yeah, we could really, we kind of have a really good team here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if things go well with the deck and they want to expand it into a whole world, I think, we'd both be on board.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys had like some sort of like surprise exclusive that you wanted.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah.
Like that would be amazing.
So if people want to learn more about you, Brian, where's the best place they could go to?
You can go to brianandersonwriter.com, which is the same as dogeatdoug.com, theconjurers.com. They all go to the same site. And then I'm Dog Eat Doug Comics on Instagram. That's where I post most of my stuff. Okay.
And what about you, Rana? If people want to learn more about you and your work, where's the best place they could go to?
They can go to my website. It's Rana-Tahir, so RANA-TAHIR.com. I'm on socials. I'm very political, so just be warned if you want to check my socials. That's all I'll say about that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, you two. And listen, when you got a new project, come back on. This has been fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.